Hello, I see people filing in. We're just going to get started here. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today for How I Green Built This. Today we're talking about residential retrofits. And before we get started, as always, we always want to thank our sponsors, Alpine Window, of course, the beautiful city of Boulder covered in snow today. 475, that's where I come in. That's my company, and we're providing the platform today. And also a silver sponsor, Hammerwell, Cottonwood, and the County of Boulder as well. Thank you all for supporting us. Another shout out. Please do, if you don't already, please do follow us. I'm a recent board member, and we're really taking it upon ourselves to up the amount of information that we put out on social media and through the newsletter. So do contact us if you want to join the newsletter and follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and events like this are recorded and we put them on the YouTube account. We also post them in the blog of the website. So you will find them there. If you want to get updated on those, you can follow us on YouTube as well. And I do want to also talk about next upcoming event. We're going to give it a go at having a virtual happy hour, which is going to be fun. Thursday, March 4th at 5:30. And it is not going to be on Zoom. It will be on this fun platform that I forget the name of, but basically you're little bubbles and you get to form bigger pods and you can only hear people in your pod and you can bounce people's bubbles away. It's going to be kind of like a mixture between a video game and a happy hour. So I really recommend signing up for that. It's going to be fun. And without further ado, we're talking tonight with Megan Daughtry and Matt Ostler of Proud House Design and Elton R Construction. And we are talking about residential retrofits. So the two of them are being part of a construction firm and design studio, respectively. Matt and Megan's companies represent two parts of a symbiotic relationship that balance the needs of residential retrofits in Boulder County. And I will stop sharing my screen and we can just have a conversation. So basically the way that we do How I Green Built This is, we have a lot of sort of formal presentations that we're all part of these days. This one is more conversational. We took from our beloved NPR show, How I Built This. We stole the name a little bit and kind of made it our own. So it's more conversational. It's more about how entrepreneurs are working within our niche of building. And so, Matt and Megan, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
And so I'll just dive right in and say, so to start off, many entrepreneurs or people who are starting their own businesses, they have sort of an aha moment about what they're going to focus on in their business or why they're starting a business. And I'm wondering if you have a story about that sort of moment and you're like, oh, I'm really, gonna be a part of this or I'm gonna make this happen. If you have a story about that, or if it's just sort of a circuitous path that you were just like, how did I end up here?
Megan, why don't you go first?
Okay. So I was that kid that used to play with her dolls, and instead of interacting with the actual dolls, it was all about where she lived. And so I rearranged her little world in her dollhouse a bazillion times, and then moved on to doing that for my friends, and took a circuitous route in the service industry, which really is what I do now as well. Followed my passion for serving in food and wine, did that for 15 years, moved on to retail environments where it's more product based and more similar to what I do now, really serving people to provide that experience and provide the products that met their needs, and eventually landed in interior design. But it all started because my dad's an architect builder. And as a kid, went to job sites, picked up blueprints, spoke and ate and drank and breathed design in the house. It was always a part of what we did. And I really admired my father as an entrepreneur doing that while raising a family of 4 girls in Berkeley, California. And I eventually found my own personal talent and skill as a designer that had always been inherent, but hadn't really had an opportunity to express itself until in my 40s. Finished design school and started my own interior design company, which I absolutely love doing. And my aha moment is recognizing that my contribution in the world is really transforming people's lives through their environments. And it really improves their lives and it improves who they are as well and how they show up. So I love being a part of that.
That makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of the design and redesign shows that you find today, they're not about the house. It's about redesigning your life, changing your life. Yeah. So Matt, how about you?
Yeah, similarly grew up around construction and tearing things apart and building forts and experimenting with things. I studied architectural engineering at CU and really then started to really begin to understand the complications of building systems and how they all have to go together. I went to work for an engineering firm and spent a lot of time at a desk at a cube doing CAD and learning about those systems. But it was when I'd go on site to these really large facilities and troubleshoot with the plumbers and electricians and engineers and come up with solutions real time. That's really when I started to know what I wanted to do. I didn't really like to focus in one area. I feel like I've been able to get enough experience in each different discipline to know enough to be dangerous, but know when to shut up and listen to the experts. So my favorite part, and I don't think there was one moment in particular, but just being on site with the different trades and figuring out, whether it's with Megan and her design team or all of us putting our heads together on what we can do to make this dream a reality. There's constraints in cost and what will work and structures and gravity. But at the end of the day, that's my favorite part, is everybody putting their head together and kind of figuring the puzzle out. And to echo Megan's point, I left that corporate sort of engineering world where it was pretty institutional and wasn't a lot of feeling in that world, into this residential construction world where it's all personal. You're in somebody's house, you're typically spending a lot of their money, and it can 99% of the time it goes great and they're just thrilled with the end result. And that's really what I'm chasing, is making that transformation. And at the end of the day, the look on their face when they move in, it's just unbelievable. The physical transformation and what someone's previous home can become is really, like I said, unbelievable.
Yeah, it really can be.
Yeah.
I did want to mention real quick that as well, I get to interview them to start, but we'll eventually later on we're going to open it up for anybody to ask questions. We can turn it into more of a conversation, but I get to grill them first. Anyway, so I'd be remiss if we should, I'm always interested in how people have fared during the pandemic, because it's all affected us in vastly different ways depending on if you happen to be lucky or unlucky or what your job is. And so I, want to check in, see how, both of you work together on some projects, not all projects, but how have things been over the last year?
It's been a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And, actually, I'm really grateful for the pandemic. My business, Powerhouse Studio, is 2 years new. Our anniversary is March 14th. And so we were really in our foundation building stage anyway when the pandemic hit. And so building my team, really identifying our zones of genius, how we deliver our services to our clients, what our actual service packages available are, really recognizing our sweet spot in Boulder in this industry was already fresh for us.
Mm-hmm.
So when the pandemic hit, we actually had just signed on a bunch of new clients in the beginning of last year. So thankfully, they carried us through the real difficulty of the summer, which would typically be super busy. And we did see a downturn in new business, but we had some wonderful projects that we could focus and execute on. And we added to our foundation the ability to do that virtually. So we transitioned out of our studio space where we love to meet and touch and feel everything and really
Mm-hmm.
be inspired to a more online environment and built tools to be able to do that, not just with cameras, but also one of the biggest assets that we bring to the table is the ability to provide 3D CAD drawings of proposed designs to our clients, and we can fly them through their entire new design before construction, which helps them truly visualize our recommendations for the improvements.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually works even better on a Zoom call to share a screen and show those images. And then we added skills to what we were doing in communication. We added levels of communication on a more regular schedule. And now, even though things sometimes are even more in person on job sites, those are now part of our DNA, an improved
Mm-hmm.
level of regular contact, really explaining our processes. If a problem comes up, how we approach that and make those recommendations, including our builder, like Matt, into that conversation. We've become even more digital than we probably ever would have been, but it's such a great platform for engaging with our clients and with our builders and all of our vendors on how to approach the process. So I feel really grateful about that. And
Mm-hmm.
business has since picked up since about last fall, and this year is booming. So we're
Yeah.
feeling even more prepared to handle that as well.
Yeah, and Matt, same question, but particularly interested if things have changed in terms of things that you need to be doing differently for the building or for the customer per customer request since the
Right.
pandemic.
Yeah. I mean, I would echo that certainly, and it's good timing. We're doing this almost a year to the
Mm-hmm.
day, that, things just got thrown into complete turmoil and unknowns. And that's a really hard time for somebody, whether they're planning a big project or in the middle of a big project, with all that uncertainty already going on. I'm echo that, feeling very fortunate that we did have enough projects going on and we could stay on those, that we kind of weathered that initial first couple months of uncertainty and started. It's not as if things came back to normal. Here we are on a Zoom,
Mm-hmm.
but they did at least normalize. And I think folks started to see that this may be, that this would be the way it was for quite some time. So, similarly adopted. I do all of our front end estimating. Typically that means going to a house and, first thing I used to do was reach out and shake their hand. That's changed. I don't know if I'll ever do that again. But adapting to that and being able to just understand that we're all kind of working together and we're going to use our different tools and draw, whether it's drawings and 3D views, and it may take a little bit longer to get to that, initial concept or that initial estimate, but we're going to put it together. And it's like Megan said, it's actually brought up a lot of things that are good practice. And those, while I miss a lot of that intimate interaction where you used to have those small conversations, and a lot of small conversations add up to really measurable progress sometimes on a project. Following up on those with an email provides a record to all those people involved that we can go back to and not say, remember when you said, oh yeah, remember when you said. So I carry that, that hopefully will carry on. And it's just kind of made us better and made us sharpen our tools. And I'd say the biggest challenge I've faced is just the sort of reluctancy to be face to face, or that kind of trying to make it as quick as possible in somebody's house. Because, that's where, especially as a builder, you build trust and you build a relationship with folks that's really important. And, when you're masked or you're just behind the phone or whatever, it's a little more difficult to build that rapport. So I'd say, here we are, like I said, a year later. I'm looking forward to things going back to some level of normalcy, but I do see I have adopted things that I'll never change. And doing those drawing reviews, doing things online, it's just, we can get so much more done sometimes without everybody going to site or coming back. It's we've developed some efficiencies that I think will carry over for a long time.
So getting right into the remodel and retrofit aspects of this, let's start off by just saying why is remodel and retrofit, why is that particularly important to Boulder? And could you give us some insight into maybe the city's history and your own history as to why remodel is important?
Matt, you want to go?
Sure. My answer to that question is always, isn't everything a remodel? 99% of the projects that come our way, even if they're a scrape, are deemed a remodel for good reason through the city of Boulder. And I think Boulder is such a unique community of different backgrounds and people that you have. I live in South Boulder, a lot of professors, a lot of people who work at NOAA and NIST, and blue collar folks who can't afford to necessarily tear down a house and just start over. They either have to do things. A lot of times what we see is folks doing things in phases. We're in projects right now, they're phase 3, 4, 5 of folks remodels. So they've found a great spot. They love their house. They love their neighborhood, or they love their location. They don't love their house. There's a lot they want to change about their house. But they're growing, their families are growing, their lives are changing, and they kind of have to modify what they've got to stay in Boulder. Otherwise you're looking at moving out. So I think remodel is such an important thing in this city for good reason. The city, you could say it in a bad way, but I think it's good. They encourage people to work with what they've got and not just tear things down, and they incentivize reuse, and it forces folks like Megan and I to be creative and be good at what we do. And I always say it's a lot easier to build a new house than it is to remodel. I wish everything was brand new, flat foundations, and not having to marry old plumbing systems and electrical systems to new, but that doesn't sound like much fun.
Yeah, definitely there's a skill set involved with remodeling that is required in discussing about the unknown, right? Because until the house is opened up again, we can talk all day long about our ideas and what we plan to do with the client's wish list in mind and budget. And then there's the reality. And so one of the great things about having a team like Matt and I together navigating that for clients is that there are a lot of things that are repeated, which is great. And also Boulder sort of went through several phases of development where certain areas and subdivisions were built around the same time by developers. So there's consistency, and we see things over and over again. And we also have tried ideas and developed those ideas, and they've been really successful for some people. So we can bring those experiences of finding solutions of improvement that really bring homes to life, that take it from builder grade 3 models for the neighborhood that were built to a real personalized environment for each client and bring to the table all the experience we've had with ways we've been able to do that, whether it's popping a top or adding a bigger deck or opening up areas to be more usable for families, or expanding into available space if that's possible. I mean, there's so many options. And with all of those options, we can approach our clients with a ton of creativity to co-create with them what's possible. And when we always start with that wish list, how do you live in this home, and how do you desire to live, and what's your version of luxury for you? It doesn't have to mean price tag. It's what, to me, luxury is about having a home that functions beautifully, and that when you're in that environment, you feel taken care of by the environment. Everything has a home. It flows the way you flow into the house, the way your family flows into the house. And the other thing to mention is the market in Boulder, and how it really supports remodeling as a smart investment. So being a kitchen and bath designer, obviously those are the two categories that have the biggest return of investment and also have the biggest impact on the function of the spaces. So, people have a choice. They can look around in the market where there's no inventory right now and think about moving. But honestly, if they own a home, the best investment they could make would be to remodel the home they already are in to be more functional. And if in 10 years when their kids graduate and they may downsize, that investment will really come back and benefit them in the end, because the market is so stable thanks to the Boulder initiatives in the 70s that limited the size of development to a certain acreage in order to support the utilities, and the open space around Boulder was purchased up to maintain the beauty and environment that is so desirable. So we're really in a utopia, is how I feel. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be a designer here. I just love it.
Matt, something you said about feeling like reuse is incentivized. I'm interested in that a little bit, but also I would love to hear from both of you what's the coolest or most fun or interesting thing that you've found when you peel apart and make the discoveries that you make. I was thinking about that today because I just saw someone on our Instagram was peeling open the walls of a building and found 100-plus-year-old building. All the walls were full of sawdust, just sawdust.
Yeah.
No idea, had no idea, but it worked out really well. They had great, it looked great, no mold.
I have never found, lots of like old bottles. Sometimes you understand why the framing's so crooked because you find that empty bottle of schnapps. But, and this one will make Jesse cringe, was like half of this house being supported just on a tree stump in the crawl space of this, really old, built in 1890 house.
Hey, it worked.
Yeah, and it worked. It was perfectly fine. For some reason, I can't get him to buy off on that anymore, but that was a good one. The tree stump as structure was that one I'll remember for a long time.
Yeah, I've had some stories of messages on interior walls, drywall, like joy, love, and peace. We found a petrified rat between studs at some point. Probably the most sort of bizarre was a statue of the Mother of Mary buried in the walls.
Oh.
Upside down, like maybe she was blessing the house. Who knows?
Yes. My grandma used to do that. I grew up Catholic. My grandmother would bury, there was a saint. You're supposed to bury it upside down in the front yard. That's what I was told. But I guess the wall too, maybe.
Yeah, and to your question about the city incentivizing remodel, I think they've shaped the code and the energy code and the building code in a way to encourage people, whether it's through their recycling initiatives or their insulation requirements, to make use of what they can. I think, also within that, a lot of properties are challenged by their setbacks or just the limitations of their site. So utilizing what you have, which may be grandfathered in, is often one of the best ways for folks to maximize what they've got. So it's always a challenge to make those old pieces work, but I do appreciate the incentive to try to make use of what's already there, keep things out of the landfill. And, if it's sturdy and it's healthy and it's been there for a long time, beyond, does it have some historical character? Certainly there's some places I don't think necessarily had historic character that we've had to maintain, but there's others that I think add a lot to the character of Boulder. And it's such a shame when you see older towns that have lost that, or main streets that are just cubist modern things because they didn't protect any of that, and in 30 years there'll be something else. I think there's a lot of reasons to preserve what's here.
Yeah, as an interior designer who does basically interior architecture within the skin of a house, we think holistically about what's possible within that footprint, right? And there is definitely a threshold of what can we maximize without actually tearing down the bones, the main bones of the foundation and the exterior walls and the roof, and still accomplish the goals of the homeowner, And so there's a really fun and creative puzzle that we're given to stick within that footprint and still it completely transform the environment. And as interior architects, we can do that all the way through permitting with support from engineers like Jesse and contractors like Matt, where we're able to address all of the requirements of the city without having to bring in an architect. And there's something to be said about that. Architects my father's an architect, so there's a vision and a purpose and an incredible talent and skill involved with that line of work. But it really is more about placement on the land and solar and shade analysis and water and how that is interacting, and it's very environmental on the exterior. But often architects sort of leave the interior to someone else. They give some basic ideas. There are 3 bedrooms, there's a bathroom, there's obviously a kitchen, but it isn't their area of expertise to necessarily go to the level that I do, which is drilling down to those details of function that actually are the things you touch and feel every single day, and how they flow from one to the next. Also, an architect that built a house in 1965 isn't necessarily thinking about the appliances that are required for code now, and how do those fit and function mechanically within that footprint. So there's a lot of things to consider that we can do for both bringing a house up to code, improving the flow, improving the potential of that house to meet the homeowner's needs, and to make it a really beautiful environment that has longevity. For us, whenever we're looking at design, we minimize the things we have to change, and we only change what's required to accomplish what's needed. Because like Matt was saying, there are always some things that are completely fine. Like maybe they're not beautiful, but if we don't have to invest in changing that, and we think about let's preserve as much as we can, then the budget and the focus can be about the things that do need to change. And it can really elevate. It can take the ability of a home to change from here to here if the filter is always how much can we keep before we even begin designing.
Well, do you find that something you said made me think, do you find that there are things in the building stock that we have that you just find are repeated, that you either you always end up having to work with, that you know right away without even looking you're going to knock out those walls, or you're going to, it's going to have some aspect of the heating ventilation system that you're just going to have to rip out. Are there things like that you just are standard around here?
I would say the split level that you walk into and you hit the staircase and go up or down, you've got no room to set your backpack. You've got nowhere to put anything. There's a stack of shoes. There's an IKEA thing in the corner that's jam-packed and failed. That is the classic walk in, and immediately we're talking mudroom. We're talking how are we gonna expand this so it's not just a total junk show as soon as you walk in the door. The split level, love it or hate it, it's here.
Yeah.
Boulder,
is that like like a suburbization version of, like, you walk into the classic mansion, you have the giant staircase in front of you, like you shrink it and that's just a staircase directly in front of the door. Like, I think that might have been how that came about. But
Yeah. One of the things we're seeing is a lot of right now are well, two things. COVID is challenging the open concept. So people are all of a sudden needing to be in an open concept environment, but need privacy. So
Right.
there's been a lot of requests for creativity around creating multi-purpose spaces, like bedrooms that can be a home office or a conference room, even dining rooms that become offices, and not just on an interior design level, but on a noise control level, on a lighting level, on a AV level for internet connection, etc. The other thing we're seeing is dining rooms in general have sort of died, and in Boulder, homes are not super big. Many properties are in the 1,500 to 2,000 square foot size. And so people are looking for, instead of possibly a more casual dining and a formal dining, combining those into one. And so we're doing tons of reconfigurations where that formal dining room can kind of take on a new identity potentially, and then carving out a space that's a casual dining that can accomplish both. So we're building tons of banquettes right now in homes where you've got storage underneath the seating and it's comfortable, but that you have a table that can expand during Thanksgiving. That's something that we're definitely seeing right now. And you hit the nail on the head with the mudrooms, Matt. I mean, there just isn't enough storage. So cabinetry in general is really being, I would say, doubled in homes, in remodels right now for all kinds of things: custom closets, banquettes with storage, mudroom closets, laundry rooms with better storage, things like that.
Jumping back a little bit to what you were saying earlier, preservation. What impacts does preservation have, do you find, in your day-to-day?
I always appreciate, I think Megan alluded to this, we get to work on some really cool houses that were built, whether it's a mid-century or, something that was built in the 1800s, 1920s, a lot of historic character. And when you go into a remodel or a project and all that casework hasn't been trimmed over, the fireplace is still there, you can see those original bones, I think it gives you a real clear direction in your design and your remodel, things you want to keep, things that really speak to the character of the house and who's lived there for 100+ years. And that's kind of from a more design and aesthetic standpoint. But on every project, the drive to save that character, or the drive to keep some of that original, I'd hate to take everything down to the bones of an old historic house and not preserve any of that original trim work or whatever it may be, you know,
Hmm.
just so much of that, I think is important to a house.
Yeah, I think if a house isn't being scraped, it's usually been purchased because the homeowner loved the architecture. Something about it. They love a mid-century or they love a
Mhm.
Victorian. And so one of the wonderful ways that we can um, update those types of architecture by respecting the architecture is to simplify potentially and keep the character and like you said, Matt, have it dictate the flavor of additional design elements. And so you're going to hear terms like um, modern Mediterranean, and
Mhm.
even bringing in mid-century character from other regions. So French mid-century or Italian mid-century, whether it's through furnishings or cabinetry or actual just the style of built-in and things like that. But we often don't have difficulty preserving character because the homeowner actually is looking for that. They loved that house when they bought it because of the design that it was built to
Mhm.
be. And so when we're coming in to modernize a kitchen or um, even redo the entire house, that initial architectural concept is really carried through.
I want to touch on, so as doing remodel, like you kind of have the benefit in terms of the green building aspect of it, just by nature of, like you said, those embodied costs that exist by just keeping the materials in there also equate to sort of embodied carbon of things that you aren't buying. I'm wondering if you have or if you have found ways of quantifying that sort of difference in terms of either carbon or I'm interested in how you steer people toward greener decision making. You steer your clients toward things that you think should be happening typically in green retrofits, and how that conversation goes.
Okay,
Sure.
I'm going to jump in here. I wish more people were picking more green elements.
Mm.
Ultimately, the the greenest design is the design that has longevity, um,
Mm-hmm.
and that if it can stand the test of time, that that's truly the most environmental installation that you can do. So whenever something new is being brought in, it's about quality, I think, and that investment may end up costing more. But if it can handle many generations of use, then that is a great green decision, even if it isn't necessarily formaldehyde free or low VOC. If it's built with quality, then that to me is like the baseline of good green design overall. We have had a lot more interest recently, I think in the past 10 years, I'd say, of green building products. And some of the ways that we can really address that is by working with local or at least American made products. For example, fire clay tile is a wonderful handmade tile made in the USA. They do as sustainable manufacturing as they can. And it ends up, it's a style of tile product that has a very handmade quality
Mm-hmm.
and is really on trend right now. People are really gravitating towards uh, things that have been touched by humans and
Mm-hmm.
showing that soul and character in the details, even if it's a simple subway shape or color of white or beige. People are looking to invest in that contribution to the end result of their design. So we're always really thrilled to recommend American Made, and Saks is another tile company that we love, um, products that will translate that character. And more and more during COVID, we were seeing things coming from overseas being really delayed. which challenged us to find even more opportunities to build relationships with vendors that were within the states or even locally made. So more projects are involving local artisans and carpenters and craftspeople to accomplish installations that we might have in the past outsourced. But due to time, schedule, budget, availability, we're finding ways to meet the needs of the project in alternative ways. But in the end, to quantify things like when a client is saying, I really want a green cabinet line, and we can sell that to them and we compare it to a more mainstream line that still is meeting the stewardship of sourcing and does belong to environmental agencies. So they're meeting the highest standards that are requested by the government, but they're not formaldehyde free. Comparison, it's like a 50% increase. And the client yet doesn't commit to that increase in price. They're like, well, I'd rather actually spend that in other ways. So it's a challenge. I would like to see that shift, but it's going to have to come from being required, I think, which is how the rest of our building industry has been able to become more green, is that when it is an expectation of our industry through code, law, government, and other areas, that's when the manufacturers of products and different vendors and industries then have to change how they're doing things, because it's an expectation that they have to meet.
Yeah, I'd very well said, Megan. To quantify something, I mentioned I'm the estimator. I quantify everything in terms of cost, and I think you said it really well, Megan, and longevity, right? That if you're tearing this flooring out, if you're redoing this in 5 years, you're really just wasted money. And, think about all of this going into the landfill. But to kind of add on to your point about it being required or expected, going into any remodel, I know I'm spending a lot of money up front on things like insulation, windows, if it's mechanical equipment, just dictated by the city's requirements. So I appreciate that. It kind of removes the gray area. And, while it can be a hard pill to swallow to spend $4,500 on a direct vent, high efficiency air or water heater, as opposed to, $500 on a just atmospheric, in the long run, you're going to save money. It's going to hurt day one, but you're doing things, you're doing good things for the environment. And I think, Boulder's a unique community that you got a lot of people who love the outdoors and love or take, environmental stewardship seriously. So, while it does at the end of the day, unfortunately, a lot of times come down to cost, I think everybody's head's in the right spot most times, and they're not resistant to those either, those demands or, what the city's going to make them do. And they feel like it's money well spent, that you're not wasting money on good windows and good insulation and good, high efficiency equipment. It's just sometimes hard to convince people that that's what because it's not pretty. Sorry, Megan. It gets covered up.
Yeah.
Nothing like telling somebody they have to insulate their crawl space. They're like, I'm never going down there. What am I doing?
So time's really flying here. I have one more that I want to ask, and then we can kind of mill about and see if people have questions or want to chat, hang out. But best worst. What's some of the most challenging projects or aspects you've had to face, and favorite moments? I would love to hear from both of you.
Go ahead, Matt.
Do we both do worst first, and then we'll end on a high?
Yeah.
Well, and I this is contradictory to what I said, but going into a house built in 1900 that's sitting on a rubble foundation that had a fireplace for a heat source when it was built, and, putting a furnace, I probably had a furnace put in at some point, but the ductwork's a mess. And, now you got to do soffits, and the city wants you to achieve a good air exchange, but we're going to keep these old windows that are 100 years old. I am relieved when I walk into a house that was built in the 80s, and there's at least some modern technology within it. It was a lovely project, but a remodel we did on a historic house built in 1890 was definitely the most challenging. I won't say it was the worst, but it was definitely hard, and but I learned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's always learning, right, Matt?
Yeah, it's always learning.
You always say you're never going to do that again.
Yeah, lots of those on that one.
Lots of those. For me, some of the worst were some of the things that happened in the beginning of my career, which was really managing client expectations, I'd probably say. I think one of the things I really strive to do now that I think I was afraid to do was managing the truth about construction, and being direct and claiming that expertise as a designer to say, there's things are going to go wrong, and we need to understand that, and be reasonable about that. What's great is we love solving problems, we love being creative about that, and sometimes it improves the design. Most of the time it actually does. To bring about an example would be a project recently where we had intended to just replace a fireplace insert in a living room on an interior wall with a newer unit, and make it a little more of a statement. But when we opened it up, we found that the venting was really poorly designed and was like kinking in 6 directions, which would no longer pass code. So the choices were, don't have a new fireplace, or can we relocate that? And our contractor actually was the creative genius to say, obviously, if we can find an exterior wall, that would make things so much simpler. And so we came to the table and everybody looked at it and thought through things. We ended up flipping basically the new plan 180, and I think our clients are pretty happy. The fireplace became a lot more visible from multiple rooms. The flow to the furnishings worked out just well. And sometimes that worst case scenario of, oh crap, we can't do what we said we were going to do, can end up being one of those happy accidents that happens in design. I'd say that's almost on every project. There's one like that.
Yeah, I'd say, there's a lot of little bests where we face some problem, face some challenge, and it ends up being the old saying, the obstacle is the way. It kind of guides the path, and it ends up being what kind of made it all work. So yeah, there's a million of those, and that's what I'm chasing, is those probably, you're either, you can save money and get what you want and achieve, it's when you put all that together and it works, it's just such a great feeling. And when, it's almost like magic when a homeowner's like, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. We're going to do it. That's really just the best moment for me, when we can make it happen and not cost 3 times as much.
Okay, well, I'm going to call Jesse on right now. We, as is traditional, we do a raffle of the people who are attending, and as a thank you for joining us all the time. And this time we have $50 to Black Belly. And Jesse, do you want to?
Yeah, our raffle is sponsored by Sloan Construction.
Thank you, Sloan.
Thank you, Sloan. And the winner, do we do a drum roll? Uh-oh, our winner just logged off.
Oh no!
I will pick again.
Oops. Don't leave now.
So I picked a new winner, and our winner is Morley Mcbride.
Morley Mcbride. I haven't been to Black Belly, but I keep hearing about it.
I
It's
asked
so
Morley.
good. You know what's so great is Morley is one of Sloan's clients and mine. Congratulations!
Morley, do you want to unmute?
Crossing our fingers over here, hoping it was going to be us.
Yay!
Awesome.
And with that, we'll kind of open it up. If people have questions, things that came up during the conversation that they want to touch more on, raise your hand, use your reaction button. You could raise your hand, or I think we can make it so we can unmute anyone who wants to be unmuted, and we can sort of have a more open dialogue. But for the most part, that is tonight. That is our offering for tonight, and that's our conversation. And so please hang out. Matt and Megan, thank you so much. But let's hang out and keep chatting. Anybody have any burning questions that they wanted to bring up right now?
So being this our first time on this platform, I can't see where people are raising their hands. I don't know if you can see that, Johnny.
Okay.
Or I can unmute everybody.
I would say just make it so that anybody can unmute themselves. And so, but I don't see anybody doing that. So
I can start us off with a question that I've been asked.
Your name came up a few times.
So being a structural engineer, I feel like sometimes I'm the bearer of bad news when I come in and say something is going to be difficult to do or hard to do, but I don't usually interact with the client as much. I usually interact with you, the designer or the contractor. And I'm just kind of curious how that interaction happens with the homeowner when things don't necessarily go as planned, or you kind of have to explain that we found that the foundation needs to be torn out.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I guess my approach is to always present options, right? That this is what we assumed. This is what we found. Jesse came and rained on our parade again. So we
throw him under the bus.
And these are the things we can do to either, here's the full blown what we have to do to go with the design, or here's 3 or 4 options. Megan and I put our heads together and we think this could work. It's always about what are the options. It's not my job to say this is impossible. Nothing's impossible. And I'm always just trying to create those different scenarios that what they ultimately want can work. So, usually it's a cost implication, right? And what I think the challenge is to present good, better, best, gold, silver, bronze. These are the options. What do you think?
Yeah, I think, Matt, that's right on. I do agree that there's always a creative approach. But ultimately, the reason an engineer is called is the desire of the client is for that specific element to change. And we need to qualify that. And so we have the conversation and we talk about how the house was built or what it's capable of doing in regards to meeting those goals. And I think managing that conversation is really important. And like you said, it's not set in stone that has to be a requirement, but often it can be a real downer, like you said, Jesse, for the client. And so I think you can talk through things like options, if the post had to be added, or if a roof line couldn't change the way you wanted it to, or whatever. A nano wall, is cost prohibitive, so let's do a double slider. There are always alternative products and solutions, but in the end, I think it's really important to understand why the client has requested for that change. Is it for visibility and a more open floor plan or actual function to happen in multiple spaces that are not achievable in the current footprint. And then approach it in a way that is, are there other ways to accomplish that? And then if it is truly down to cost, I think it's, you know, there are two directions that I always go. One is like, can we phase the project so we accomplish financially what you can afford right now, and address the engineering accordingly in whatever way that means? Or don't forget that your house value is at a certain level, and this change and the increase in value of the home that you are going to create will come back to you. And to remind people about those decisions and how sometimes it doesn't feel like it in the moment, but that improvement that can be accomplished through great engineering and design and construction is something that has value beyond the function as well. And so to think kind of more holistically and long term about that, that the difference that it can make is everything. Does that answer the question, Jesse?
Yeah, thank you.
I also, by the way, love working with you, love working with engineers, and I wish you could hear how excited the clients are about what you do more often. So let me know. I'd love, because it's life changing. You know, those structural things, they really make a difference.
It's not all barren walls and bad news, Jesse.
You should really think about considering those tree stumps as stabilizing forces.
Right? I'm still going for that.
Over 100 years. Question coming in. What do you see for the future in your practice for the next 5 to 10 years? Yeah, I'm also just sort of interested in if there's anything you're looking out for in terms of like on the horizon, either locally or bigger things that you see as the future of the industry.
I guess that could be twofold, right? Design trends, or how people are remodeling. I think COVID the last year will make a lasting effect on how homes are designed, and like Megan said earlier, that flexibility is really important. Places to gather with the family, and places to tuck your schoolwork away and then transform back, places to exercise at home. I think that's going to drive a lot of design decisions for quite some time. Would you agree, Megan?
Absolutely. I mean, I hear a lot of clients who are not ever going to go back to the office after this. Their businesses where they work, whether they're self-employed or work for someone else, are pivoting to a new model, and that the home work / office type experience is doable. It could also be a shared workspace or other ways to do that. But I do think that more and more our daily activities are going to be folded into a more multifunctional home. And I also see it also addresses the aging in place that's going on, where people are living longer, they're healthier, and the alternatives for downsizing are not as desirable, and staying in the home that they have paid off and have lived in, raised their kids and grandkids in, is becoming a more and more common thing in the Boulder area. So, we are CLIP certified, which is Certified Living in Place Professionals. And as that certification dictates, we help families navigate what updates can be done to maintain safety and functionality and beauty at the same time, so that longer time can be spent in that family home, even multi-generation. So I see that happening too. I think in general, the home is becoming a much more valuable part of people's lives. And
Mm.
COVID has been a big part of that. I think it's been going in that direction. I think the real estate market is also dictating that it's more valuable than ever and continuing to grow. And I think our industry is seeing a huge boom, and I see that continuing. I think it's exciting because what that will mean is funding for better things, better products, better systems. I think our government has some catching up to do on
Mhm.
permitting and facilitating actually that interaction in order to ensure that safe, high quality construction is being executed in an efficient way. And I just see all of that improving and actually streamlining. So I'm excited. What I imagine is the industry becoming more and more tightly bonded and reliant on each other to accomplish the overall goals, both for clients, for the environment, for government code, things like that. And I'm excited for those kinds of partnerships. I'm always looking to that. I think community is everything, even in a work environment. And if we can support each other to make change for the better, for our clients, for the world, that's a true impact we can have in our lifetime. And I feel really grateful to be a part of an industry that can do that.
Mm.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that the old adage of like the hard-headed contractor who's not going to call the designer and ask any questions versus these two like warring tribes that whether it's just people wanting to team up or what it is, that this it's just driving the industry in a good direction, that people are much more collaborative, much more open to suggestions and how things were done differently. And I think everybody's just getting better because of that. And I really appreciate the building industry in Boulder, because thankfully there's enough demand that we don't have to really battle over projects. And there's not this competitive spirit that might make things a little more difficult. So it's nice to see the industry going that way. And I would echo that in the next, I don't see any sort of slowdown or only more and more building and remodel and people relocating to Boulder for better or worse. And only the best teams who work together and can kind of put their brains together to come up with these solutions are going to be the ones who can do it.
And Melanie raised.
Yes, thank you, Johnny.
Yeah.
I had a question for both Megan and Matt about how, we're in a tricky situation with COVID where I feel like you both just really spoke to community and collaboration, but also, working with new people. I think that it's been a time where networking has definitely been sort of constrained, and doing the cold reach out and things like that, it's a little more sensitive and difficult to do that at this time. And I was curious if there's, if you've been sort of insular in who you've been working with and keeping with the people that you know. And if that's the case, if there have been any good reach outs that either of you have experienced of people new to you reaching out in a way that you felt was sensitive to the times we're going through.
Such a good question.
Yeah.
I would say during COVID, I have had a variety of expansions. It's also, I'm fairly new in my current iteration of my business, so it was a natural part of that growth. But I definitely feel that the relationships that existed prior to COVID really got anchored in, because there was a sense of confidence and reliability that the ethos of our companies were in simpatico relationship. Like we were approaching things with the same caution and communication level and management overall of both clients, timelines, budgets. And it's a delicate, very delicate conversation to be able to have and not scare off business or cause extra stress, right? So it has definitely been a strengthening of existing relationships, but I've been really pleasantly surprised as well to find even more local contractors, real estate agents, other artisans, vendors, tradespeople, becoming even more outgoing, I would say, than they would have been, because they recognize the power of building relationships, and that we live in such a word of mouth town. You know, Boulder is seriously, it's like you hear from your neighbor that so and so did a great job, and it's basically golden, like you're pre-vetted. And especially if there has been an experience where they could see the quality of the work, or have a real heartfelt story told about that, you know, wow, we really hit a snafu, and this was my experience. I just really believe I have loyalty to that particular brand. And so we live in a pretty small community, you know, really. So it's so important to take care of every single interaction, you know, even if it's just an inquiry about potentially working together, or a walkthrough with someone at a project, even if they don't end up working on it, just taking the time to really take care and support each other in that interaction, in that, because we all need each other so much, you know. And so that's just my initial response.
Yeah, and I would say, to echo your point, that those bonds we had going in, those connections we had, everyone kind of came together, and it was like, okay, how are you doing it now? How are we doing it now? And there was kind of a few phases of it, right, where everyone was kind of on their heels, and then, okay, this is how we're going to move forward. And then there was an outreach point of, hey, do you know somebody who can do this? I'm looking for a new connection that way. And I think, like you said, Megan, a lot of folks kind of looked at their network, and where they might have assumed that people were making their own connections, or they started reaching out, and making, just because they were appreciating it themselves, realizing that, hey, I could connect these two people because that's what that's what that other guy did for me. So I think it was a good moment to look at the really positive and strong connections that I had, certainly, and see how I could make sure those people were getting what they need and getting you know, it's an interesting industry where you've got you know, from 18-year-old carpenters all the way up, you know, to our clients who are you know, CEOs of major companies, or you know, like I mentioned, blue collar folks. So it runs the gamut. We get to know folks from just every walk of life, and it's amazing how each of those fit together. And you know, I've met a dog sitter through a remodel. You know, it's like all of these different parts and pieces. It's a small town. It feels bigger, I think, you know, day to day sometimes than it really is, because yeah, you can't go far without running into somebody, you know, and or hearing about them. And I think it, like I said, it kind of levels everybody up, because you better do a good job or somebody's going to hear about it.
Thank you both. I appreciate it.
Great.
Well, I think an hour has just flown by, and we're gonna pretty much call it there, and say thank you again to Matt and Megan for joining us. And I do want to give another shout out in the spirit of networking, and like you were saying, if you want to check out that virtual happy hour that we're doing, I think it should be fun. Just go on the CGBG events page and sign up for it. And I don't think it requires you to download anything new or anything like that. So And also just in general, I find this organization is fantastic. I mean, it's one of the things that people get the most out of is the connection to everybody else who's doing this work in the area. And so if you're not a member, I highly recommend you become one. Once we can all meet in person again, it's going to be fantastic, and it's just going to be crazy parties all the time. So you should be in on it for when that happens. So yeah, I think we're going to wrap it there and say, good evening to everybody. Have a good night, and we'll see you next time.
All
Thanks
right.
for
Thanks,
having
everyone.
me.
Thank you. Thanks for hosting, Johnny.
Absolutely. Thank
Thank
you.
you.